right.
NightWatchman, where have you
Good day,
been?
LeRoy.
I have not seen you in, it seems like, a minute. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah, well, we live in this virtual world now, and that's hopefully soon we'll have herd immunity and we can all get together and hug in the park, but not just yet.
Oh,
Not just yet.
it sounds like you're quoting Dr. Atlas, huh? So you believe in herd immunity. Great. Okay. Well, I'd like you to know.
Do not ever accuse me of quoting Dr. Atlas.
Well, I want you to know that I had my second Moderna vaccine on Wednesday, the 24th. So I'm good to go.
Okay,
right?
good. All right.
And so you know what?
I'll be coming to hug you in about 10 days. just to
I can't wait. So, we have a great show this evening, buddy.
Right. So, this is an opportunity for us to just take a deeper dive into an issue that I think has been disturbing, certainly to us personally, and it's finally something that's reached national attention. Although I can say this has probably been something that's been brewing. It was simmering during the entire Trump administration and really picked up as the beginning of the pandemic. And what we're talking about is Asian violence against Asian Americans. And so we were really grateful to assemble a group of people who can really help shed light on this. So do you want to do the introductions, and you mention the people and I'll talk a little bit about their bios.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think first that we could actually bring up is actually one of the first people when I was reaching out to my good friend Eleanor She said that this woman definitely can speak to volumes about it, and that would be Miss Tiffany Chang.
Okay. And so Tiffany is the executive director of advancing. I'm sorry, she's the director of community engagement at Advancing Justice /AAJC, where she develops and leads field outreach and public education campaigns to advance their policy campaigns and supports over 200 local Asian serving organizations nationwide. Tiffany, welcome to Soul Lounge Primetime.
It's good to be with you both. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Next up is Joanne Yu.
All right. Joanne is here.
Hey,
Joanne, I can't read Joanne's whole bio because she's done a lot of things, but she's the executive director of the Asian American Federation, a membership organization that works with nearly 70 nonprofits that represent and support the Pan-Asian community. And her professional experience, she's been in different roles addressing these issues and interfacing with various organizations. So we're really pleased to have Joanne on the show. Welcome to Soul Lounge Primetime.
Thank you so much. Good to see Tiffany, who was a former staff member.
That's right. I cut my teeth in the house of Joanne Yu.
Okay.
Longtime New York City resident also.
Perfect. So next up we have Mr. Jan Lee. Jan.
All right. So
hi everyone.
Here.
All right.
Jan is a multi-hyphenate. He is an entrepreneur, contractor, and a landlord. He is second or third generation in Chinatown and owns a building on Mott Street. And so he looks at this issue from a lot of different angles, as an entrepreneur, as a landlord, and as a resident in Chinatown. So we appreciate your point of view, Jan.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with the panelists that you've chosen, and it's just an honor to be here. I hope I can add to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And
absolutely,
last but not least,
and Derrick Leon. Yay!
How's it going, everybody? Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Absolutely. So besides being, of course, a graduate of Stuyvesant High School. I wonder why you're here. Yes, but his uncle is, of course, my good friend, Mr. Danny Chen. So, Bob, you have anything more to add there?
Do I?
Not much.
One thing that you did say that you went to the University of Buffalo, and what did you study at the University of Buffalo?
I graduated with a bachelor's in communication, and I got my graduate certificate in new media study.
Nice.
After that, just a whole bunch of marketing jobs, and I did own my own company as well too. So I'm an entrepreneur, just like Jan. I actually owned Access Nightlife and Whisper Entertainment, so it was the largest Asian-centric event planning company on the East Coast. But that time has come and gone. So.
Well, you know what? Don't worry, Derrick. We will get back. We absolutely will get back to that. But you know what? I would definitely want to thank you guys for all joining in. And you know what? I wanted to kind of open it up because certainly we know for the past year, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been blamed for the pandemics, slander born of xenophobia, ignorance, and white supremacy. As a matter of fact, Courtney Sato, a postdoctoral fellow at the Charles Warren Center for Studies in American History, when commenting on the Atlanta shooter, stated the important thing to remember is that this isn't really an exceptional moment by any means. What are your thoughts? Anyone? Open it up.
Sure, I can start us off. So Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC, we're a national nonprofit whose mission is to advance the civil liberties and human rights of Asian Americans and to create a more fair and equitable society for all. So obviously, when this issue came up a year ago, we were watching and monitoring it closely. We've been trying to provide resources for our national community for the past year, and we've really seen an uptick in requests for those resources. And that need is sprouting up everywhere, not just in New York and not just in DC or California, but all over the country. And we know that community organizations like AAF here in New York City are doing amazing work, mobilizing folks to combat these incidents. And I think Courtney was right. This is not at all the first time we've seen a wave of anti-Asian violence in this country. We can think back to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the fact that that was the first federal law banning a whole group of people based on their race. And what's more is that in this situation, we can't ignore that it was 6 Asian women who were killed, and just because they were working at these Asian-owned massage parlors. So what makes this Atlanta massacre to me so visceral is that it feels like a culmination of the dual pandemics of COVID and anti-Asian hate, on top of a gun violence epidemic that has been around since I can remember, on top of the xenophobia and misogyny that's not only pervasive, but is actually part of the very DNA of our country. So that is, I think, why we're seeing such a huge outpour of just over this incident, because it really lays bare so many levels of injustice that exist in our society today.
And from a historic, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Chang.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that from a historic standpoint, we're looking at Chinatowns across the United States, and speaking from somebody who's been in Chinatown for 3 generations, I can, from a firsthand point of view, tell you that tour guides for 100 years in Chinatown have always considered Chinatown to be exotic and violent at the same time. And when people are on tours, you can imagine, and we're not the only neighborhood that is described that way, but this exotification of Chinese people and the way that our culture is personified definitely plants the seeds in how we are treated as human beings across the United States. So starting from the 1900s, we had tour guides that would come down here and pay people, actors, to portray themselves as drug addicts and prostitutes. And so, rich whites from the uptown area would come down on these floors. There's vestiges of that still today. And it's unfortunate that violence and bloodshed are still used in marketing materials all the way up until right now, even by some restaurants and bars here in Chinatown today. So it continues that celebration of violence and celebration of othering of people. And I think that does nothing, absolutely nothing, to help people, hardworking people, assimilate into the country.
So I can jump in as well. It's a Saturday. I had a rough week. I have a whole lot to say here. I really appreciate Tiffany and Jan. Tiffany, I consider part of my New York family. Jan is a good friend, and I really appreciate what they've laid down a little bit of the foundation of what I also want to share with you. But what is happening in the Asian community is nothing unusual. I mean, yes, there's spikes in the crime, but if you really look at this country's history, let's be honest, this country was built on the backs of people of color and on targeting one community after another, and on racism. Our New York City's immediate history, if you think about after 9/11, what the East Asian community is going through, the South Asian Muslim Arab community had to deal with after 9/11. I remember the stories of my friends and people who are part of my extended work family. The stories that I've heard is just gut-wrenching, and that the pain from all of the targeting still resonates to this day. And then we remember the Muslim ban and how the Muslim community was vilified. And so I just feel like we just take turns being targets and being targets of racism. And I think that is something that really obviously is quite frustrating. And as Tiffany said, many of us who work on the ground saw this coming, because I remember hearing even about the virus last year, like January last year. I said, oh my God, here we go, right? Like, because globalization, things, like viruses and illnesses, that they get moved around. I never thought it would be to this level, but obviously here we are. And the Asian American community, and we have alerted people, and we have let them know what is coming. This is what's going to happen if you don't pay attention. We saw this. The writing was on the wall when the small businesses started to close in February, even before Lunar New Year. I want to ask all of my fellow New Yorkers who bought into this racist narrative is, you see us every single day. We're your friends and we're your neighbors, and you come and shop at our stores and you eat at our restaurants. And then overnight you hear something, that there's a pandemic. One, we are impacted by that pandemic too. And the second part is, if you see us every single day, what changed? You're still your neighbors, we're still your friends, and we are hurting just like you. The fact that you are shunning us and we feel isolation, this is where the real tragedy of New York is, because New York is not like this. We rally, and we are very much in for a big city. We are very much communal minded, and all of that has just really been a painful reminder for not just the Asian community, but all communities, of how much conversations like this need to happen, and how much we need to really tackle on the underlying cause of all of this. And that is racism, systematic oppression. That's the real, and poverty. Those are the three targets we need to hit.
Nice. Derrick.
Yes, sir. I mean, all I can do is really echo what everybody else, said previous to me. It's not something new. It's been around since the Chinese Exclusion Act. The murder of Vincent Chin, the people who killed him, they never even saw a day in jail. I mean, that just goes to show that it's so easy to use Asians as a scapegoat, because we're portrayed by the media and just society in general perceives us as people that aren't going to fight back. Where the majority of us don't report any crimes that happen against us. And the even sadder thing is, even if we do, nothing happens. So there's no repercussions for coming against us. And, you know, it's not something that just happened during the last administration. It just so happens that, you know, the previous president decided that it was okay to be publicly racist against us. You know, I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I've been here for 40 years. And for the majority of my life, I never really experienced real in-your-face racism. Maybe, you know, a little casual racism here and there, but, you know, you're in an argument with somebody and, you know, a racist comment just kind of pops up, but it's never walking in the street and, you know, getting pummeled by racist slurs. And, you know, I only really experienced that this year. So it, you know, like, it's just when the most powerful man in the world decides, and it's not just that he said China virus or Kung flu once. He repeatedly said it, even though he was publicly admonished for it, and still to this day refuses to apologize for it. So that's just giving society as a whole a free pass to publicly harass us and attack us, and, you know, just like in Atlanta, kill us.
Yes, totally. Tiffany.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add just one more historical nuance. We know that violence against Asian Americans is obviously nothing new, and that Asian American women are uniquely affected by the compounding impacts of misogyny, structural violence, white supremacy. And I just wanted to emphasize that fact because not only was there the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, but there's an even longer history of scapegoating, erasing, and hypersexualizing Asian women in particular. So a lot of people may know about the Chinese Exclusion Act, but not a lot of people know about the Page Act of 1875, which preceded that, which actually barred Asian women exclusively from immigrating to the United States on the basis that lawmakers believed that they had a propensity for becoming prostitutes. And that's an actual quote. And for, of course, compromising the virtues of white Christian men. So that's, you know, that's real. And that is, you know, a legal framework for the way that our society and our country has historically treated Asian women by painting us with a broad brush. And, you know, just the fact that the shooter's justification in Atlanta for murdering these 6 women, essentially blaming them for his own vices, is the same justification that was used by our government to impose the first Family Separation and Exclusion Act. And I think that definitely requires us to really think about the way that women of color's bodies have been exploited in this country in service of white supremacy. And even to this day, right? Like, something that's been really powerful and I think surprising to people who aren't Asian women is the pervasiveness and relentlessness of harassment that we receive, not just as women, but as Asian women. And that is something that we have to live with, whether we're we're backstage or in a boardroom, whether we are walking in the street or on a dating app. Like, those are all things that Asian women have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's very personal. I mean, as recently as I was at college, there was some racist graffiti that was painted in the front of my building, and it was in silver spray paint, and there was like this round face with these like 2 angry slits for eyes, and underneath it said Chang B, and it wasn't, you know, you can fill in the rest of that second word. So, you know, that was really, really, really surprising and really shocking to me. But at the same time, it's an example of how this type of misogyny and racism is often intertwined and inextricable. You know, it's not just catcalling because you're a woman, it's catcalling because you're an Asian woman. And those types of microaggressions or macroaggressions are commonplace for more than us than you would think.
I can share a story that highlights Tiffany's point. last Friday we held a peace vigil for the victims of the Atlanta shooting, and one of my staff members, obviously it's an incredibly upsetting time for all of us. And she said, as she was, and I've been telling my staff members, if we do an in-person event, I demand, to be honest, that everybody takes a cab that the office was spring for, because I don't want them out in public. I'm scared for them. And so I think in sort of her her sense of urgency to get to Union Square, she got on the subway, and even in the height of all of this conversation where people should be a little more thoughtful, somebody said something really disgusting to her. And then after she gets there, and I had to get there early as well because I was a person with a sound permit. And so we're sitting and waiting for our other colleagues to show up. They're two Asian women sitting there and just trying to figure out how we're going to get through the vigil, and how we are going to process our pain. And a man walks by and says something absolutely disgusting. She didn't hear, I did. I'm not going to, it's not even worth repeating. And I'm thinking the irony of that, right? Like, we're sitting there for a vigil to start because people who looked like me got killed. And there were sisters, obviously. And there's a man walking by spewing the same garbage that got those women killed in the first place. And I thought, this is where we are, right? This is, as Tiffany said, what laid bare during the pandemic, but what laid bare is, all of the comments that the women have. I can't tell you how many women, when I talk about these things, I want people to share their stories because I think that's how we empower ourselves and to heal. I don't know one woman who hasn't gotten some disgusting comment about being a woman and being an Asian. And I think at this point we've just now it's scary because we don't know where those comments will lead. It could lead to real violence. We look at Atlanta, but those are this is the world we navigate, and this is a world that we navigate, and we are very, very fearful right now. I have been, fearful. I know most of the people on my block, but if I'm going out for a walk or if I'm going out to the bodega, and somebody's walking behind me, I will step out into the street because I don't like walking behind me. And I will either walk, with the cars coming at me, or I walk on the sidewalk because the discomfort of hearing footsteps behind me and not knowing who's behind me is very scary. And so, what is happening, which just is like the biggest heartbreak for me, is that I can't trust my fellow New Yorkers. I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're going to come to harm me. I don't know. They might be, perfectly, they're perfectly fine. Most, New Yorkers are absolutely lovely. But I don't know. Is somebody going to come behind me and smack me on the head? Are they going to call me a racial slur? Are they going to spit at me? I don't know. And so for me, my precaution is go step out into the street, let people pass you. And I say that because I want the non-Asian New Yorkers to understand and to not be offended when we do stuff like that, because this is not about offending you. It's not about am I suspicious of you? It is, we're trying to figure out are you somebody who's going to potentially harm me? And so I need to take care of myself a little bit.
Yeah, I also want to
absolutely
just comment, as obviously an African American man, and I think I can speak for Curtis as well on this, how deeply we were just disturbed, moved by the actions of last week, but also we've seen the coming rise of it, and for us it hit us, just as an extension of the things that happened last year with George Floyd. It all comes from the same place. And in particular, I was disturbed not only by what happened in Atlanta, but there was another incident that happened also last week with an elderly Chinese woman, I believe in San Francisco, who basically was attacked by a white man and took a stick and beat him, so that he needed to be taken off by a stretcher. And it was disturbing. It was like, one part of me is like, good for you, thank you for standing up for yourself. Then seeing that her pain was still being trivialized in this whole thing, is that how any woman of this age should not have to deal with this,
Yeah.
much less, just a random attack on her. Because why? It's unfathomable how people can basically, whatever they're going through, to just actualize it on another human being instead of dealing with whatever you're going through. It's just appalling. And we see, and I think that I can speak for, I don't speak for all Black people. I speak for a significant amount of them who we feel the same pain, because we know it's coming from the same place. This just actualized hate and racism and misogyny that has been allowed to fester during the 4 years of the Trump administration. And we also have to face the fact that it's still going on, that it didn't go away with the new administration, and that we still have to stay vigilant and look out for each other and have these conversations. And if other people are uncomfortable about it, so be it. But the indifference to it is just not acceptable anymore.
There is, racism has a way of infiltrating so many parts of our society in ways that we don't even realize. But if you live in Chinatown, you start to understand that the racist attitudes towards Chinese people here in Chinatown is really deep-seated. And I'll give you examples. There's part of the things that we do as a block association is we review liquor licenses that are coming into Chinatown, and we listen to the applicants. And when you see a white owner who's very well resourced opens a place, and on his menu he has a drink called white geisha, that raises some alarms, obviously. And when you see people starting to market their dumplings and says this came from the Bloody Angle, which is Doyer Street. And then when you see white tour guides who come down to Chinatown and stand in front of a woman's dumpling shop and call her the soup Nazi because her language ability is not great, and therefore she seems very terse. And so she's been called the soup Nazi dumpling lady. And she's been accused of not giving you the correct change and instead giving you dumplings, and you probably won't get the correct change from her. So these are subtle things that infiltrate American psyche. And this is 2021. This is not, maybe not this year because of the pandemic, but all the way up until the pandemic, underneath my window, I would hear tour guides using language that was very offensive. But the trick is that when they're using their microphone and they want to say something offensive, they move the microphone away from them so that us Chinese people who speak English don't hear it. And that's a reality. That is what softens the ground for someone like Donald Trump to use the language that he does and get away with it, because people are marketing racism. And when you come to Chinatown and you open restaurants and you disparage the other chefs who are hardworking Chinese chefs, and the only way that you could excel in this very competitive industry is to disparage the other hardworking people here rather than to elevate your own restaurant, that affects us, because it really puts us in the second-class citizen position. We've had people say, I need to open a liquor license here because Chinatown doesn't have a Michelin star, and that's what Chinatown needs. Well, who determined that? Why did you come into Chinatown and say that what Chinatown needs is what you want, and it's based on your selling of alcohol because of where you are? So what you'll find is mediocre businesses coming to Chinatown and saying, wow, this is a really competitive food market. I think I'll market the otherness. I'll market the fact that I'm very high class, and I'll market myself in the slum that Chinatown is, and that way I will stand out and rise up among the slum. And they think it's unique. They think that they're being very clever. This has been done for 100 years. There's people that have been doing this and marketing Chinatown's otherness to make money. And so we're onto it. We see it, we smell it, we read it, we talk about it, publish articles about them, but yet it persists. And so New Yorkers need to use their dollars to protest and say, I will not support a business that exploits Chinatown. There was a similar incident in, I believe it was Harlem, where a woman decided to market what she thought were bullet holes from a previous location for her cafe. And she highlighted the bullet holes as an era of the gang wars in Harlem. Now, the neighborhood in Harlem did not stand for that, and they picketed her business, and she was not able to open. But that's the kind of thing that New Yorkers need to do. They need to research and say, it doesn't smell right to me. I don't like the fact that they're using the neighborhood in this way. Marketing violence and prostitution and othering of people is not something that I'm going to spend my money on. I'm going to look for authenticity. And that's where better restaurants, better chefs, and better food will prevail. And that's what we need to do in New York.
I want to add to Jan's comment is people need to remember the Chinatowns and the different ethnic enclaves and different enclaves of communities of color. Those are places that we were allowed to live.
That's right.
It was not like, we're going to create this neighborhood that's going to be right. They were created because it was the only place that the systems, right, the powers that be said this is where you can live. And so the residents who are there, the small businesses, they took a chance. They spent their life savings opening it up. And so, opening up small businesses for a lot of, not just even the Asian American or the immigrant small businesses, but communities of color. The small businesses in our neighborhoods, that's somebody's retirement plan. And in this pandemic and through all of this, people's racist assumptions, they're going down. Those small businesses are closing hard. And we need to be able to recognize what those places need for our communities, and to be able to support that. And I'd love for people to think about those things and support the important. The small businesses are the anchors of our communities, and they need to be able to, walk in there and spend dollars.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to kind of go back to was something that you had mentioned, Derrick, and this was regarding, of course, who killed Vincent Chin. Now, I remember the case, but I hadn't realized that his murder sparked the national movement for anti-Asian American rights. And I want to understand this because now this was actually the first time that DOJ brought a civil rights case against the killers. But now, looking at Atlanta, are you all concerned that the Atlanta shooting has not yet been classified as a federal hate crime?
I mean, of course it's concerning. Of course, there needs to be an investigation, but the fact that you're holding so much weight behind what the killer said, he's a killer. He killed 8 people. Why are you even considering what he said? If he told you he was a purple elephant, does that really matter? I don't think so. And one of the surviving, a Korean survivor of the shooting stated that he said, I'm going to kill all Asians. So he targeted 3 Asian businesses. He killed 6 Asian women. I mean, how many check boxes do you need to get to classify it a hate crime? It's insane.
Oh, come on, Derrick. He had a bad day.
A really bad day. It was a really bad day.
Incredible.
I'm still just stunned by the empathy and I've been starting to call is concierge justice for white men. When they commit a crime, it's like, oh, you got to understand the circumstances that was going on with him when he killed all these people.
Life. Yep.
Bad day, and he's had sexual problems and frustrations. You have to understand. Why do we have to understand that? I mean, we understand that he targeted people, went to their place of business, and shot and killed them. We understand that he expressed his reasons why, and that shows his racism. It just seems so obvious that it's kind of an affront to all of us that it's not been listed as a hate crime.
Yeah. Joanne.
Yeah, and go ahead,
Joanne.
So what Tiffany, mentioned about the women, what's particularly frustrating is, questioning the job of the victims. What does it matter? 8 people died. 6 of the women died because they had to work through a global pandemic to put food on the table. That's all people need to know. And so all of these conversations about like, do you only get justice if you have a professional job? Whatever that conversation needs to happen. I'm seeing social media like play that out. It's really disgusting. The families, the victims have asked not to put their names out because they're grieving too. The entire community is grieving, and the families. There's their names are out there, the photos are out there. It is all out there, and so they've been dragged into the media spotlight where they don't want to be. And I don't think they've even had time to process their own grief. And there's conversations and judgments being made of the victims, and that is just truly unfair.
And I want to say that having a store on Mott Street for 18 years, there were 2 questions that really used to bother me. One is, do you speak English? And then followed up by, you speak English really well. That was another one. People felt it necessary to compliment my language ability. But oftentimes men would come in and ask me where to get a massage. And it's because I somehow shopkeeper. Oh, yeah. So, Joanne and Tiffany, I can relate. People would come in, mostly white men, would come in and ask me where I can get a massage. And they would kind of give you that wink and a nod. And so the joke that my cousin and I, who we worked together, I would write it on a piece of paper and it would be the address to the 5th precinct. And these were people that were not from my neighborhood. So I knew that they did not know that address, and they would find themselves standing in front of the 5th precinct. So, that's how we get back at people in New York, right? We don't have to say much, but you know what I meant when you ended up at the 5th precinct. It's like, get out of my neighborhood. We don't need this. It is what they heard about Chinatown that drew them to Chinatown, that enabled them to walk into a shopkeeper's store and ask me where to get a massage. Now, you picture that same white man walking into Elizabeth, New Jersey, into a small store that, it has nothing to do with that, and ask them where to get a massage. It's because I'm Chinese. It's because I'm in Chinatown. It's because they felt free to walk in and ask that question. And that is the diminishment of us as a people this is 20th century stuff. This is not 1920. What my grandfather would have to have gone through, very similarly, sadly, we're still going through that. But, I do want to talk about a lot of wonderful things that have been going on lately. And that is a surge of people coming to Chinatown to support Chinatown, of an enormous diversity of people that we have not seen in a long time, but it is particularly diverse. And 8 o'clock on a Saturday, I'm not going to be able to eat in my own neighborhood. I know that on the weekends, I can't even get a table. I would have to wait 40 minutes for a takeout. And that speaks more and more strongly, I think, about how the rest of New York really feels about Chinatown, because there's a lot of love coming our way. And it's because of programs like this. It's because of media. It's because of people saying, you have to go there and you have to support them. But one thing I do want to add, and this is on the heels of what Joanne is saying, the more people that come to support Chinatown, the safer we are, because the empty streets is what makes us very vulnerable. And what makes our seniors and our children very vulnerable are the empty streets. And so the other effect of spending your dollars and supporting Chinatown business is your presence in Chinatown actually causes a safer environment. And that is just, I can't stress that enough, that just being there is showing us your support.
I also want to ask you guys to comment a little bit on when Asian American hate comes out, it doesn't differentiate between the various diversity of Asian communities, and so the quote unquote China virus affects Japanese, affects Koreans, affects all manner of Pacific Islander, Asian. Anyone who has a look that is Asian is now targeted and conflated and thrown together in this bunch and a target for hate. And then also we see with the misogyny, this question, and I'm sure you might have heard it, Tiffany. Where are you from?
I'm so triggered right now. I have heard that question more times than I can count.
Yeah, and the where are you from is an idea that if they can pick out your actual ethnicity within the Asian diaspora, that's now an opening for them to now come in with their exotifying you and going with the rest of that program. And it's just it's mind numbing how pervasive it is, you know.
Absolutely. And, you know, that type of dehumanization, that depersonalization is exactly and the enabling of that attitude is what led directly or otherwise to the murders of these 6 women in Atlanta. And going back to something that Joanne said about who these women were, they were human beings. It doesn't matter what their profession was, or what the motive was on the part of the killer. Like it's very clear that he went to those businesses in order to kill people of Asian descent. And I think that's why, and this sort of lack of conversation and discussion about anti-Asian violence, we've had to come up as a community with our own solutions to that violence, right? Because, you know, in the case of Vincent Chin, and even today, we're seeing that the law and the way that defines what a hate crime constitutes, it's not always on our side. You know, usually it's not, right? And you know, we all live in this same system of structural oppression and racism. And so I think it's really up to us. And to Jan's point about safety in community, that's really what we need to move towards, right? It takes community to create that safety. And, you know, touching back on what Joanne mentioned earlier about how the history of these neighborhoods was that of these enclaves where people of color were allowed to live. And it's in those same areas where there's just been this constant disinvestment from the social safety net and from the social services that can actually help people in times of crisis. And so, you know, folks are asking, okay, what is the answer? And, you know, we need our communities, in order for our communities to feel safe and to feel heard, I think everyone has to chip in and do their part, whether it's calling up your Congress members and calling for more hate crime legislation or more resources for in-language hotlines and bystander intervention trainings. Those are all things that we can do individually. But even in a day-to-day situation, when we're out in public and in the situation that we do see somebody being harassed or even assaulted, there is there's always something that we can do as individuals. And AAJC for the past year has been proud to team up with an organization called Holla Back. And we've been providing folks with this free online training, talking about the discrimination that Asian Americans are facing right now, putting it into historical context, and talking about that wide range of microaggressions to aggressions, right? Like we get the ni haos and the konnichiwas in the street, but we also see things like Atlanta. And I want to commend our affiliate in Atlanta for taking the lead on working with the victims' families, guarding their privacy, lifting up their stories with the family's consent, and raising almost $1 million at this point to assist their families. But I think that moving forward and getting past this crisis is going to take everyone. We talk up in these bystander intervention trainings, we talk about things that you can do on the subway if you see that somebody is getting harassed. Like maybe you barge in through and say, excuse me. Maybe you drop a bag of coins so that the attention is diverted. Maybe you document it on your phone. There are so many ways that people can show their solidarity without necessarily putting themselves in harm's way. And we want folks to know that is those acts of kindness really go a long way, especially given how commonplace it is to face violence and hostility in public. So just wanted to offer that, even though it's a really, really scary time for a lot of folks, that there is something that you can do. There is something, then there are a lot of folks who are interested in doing the right thing for their neighbors. We've trained over like 30,000 people at this point, and usually we're opening up slots and they're filling up within hours. Another thing I want to lift up is the work of Asian American Federation. They've got this amazing handbook, which I'm going to let Joanne talk about, and talking about like how to keep yourself safe. And the reporting platforms, Stand Against Hatred is one of them, Stop AAPI Hate, and Asian American Federation has one as well. And this is really important, the data piece, because a lot of times we are not in the media, even when we are the ones being blamed for the coronavirus, right? Like our voices aren't heard. It's so important for us to document and to report these hate crimes in a way that does not necessarily involve law enforcement, because we know that we as a community are the ones who can determine how to keep ourselves safe. So I'll just stop there.
And Bob, I love that the question you're asking about, where are you from? Where are you from? What they're asking me actually is, what is your ethnicity, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's an innocent question. And if somebody says to me, what ethnicity? I can tell you, I'm Korean American. That's fine. But when they say, where are you from? Where are you really from? Why are you assuming that I'm not an American? And I think that's the othering that our community sees. We are the perpetual foreigners in our own homeland. And, this is what has made it easy for people to target us, because they don't see our humanity. They don't see us as their fellow Americans. And so I do get that question a lot. And, we'd all laugh. I mean, honestly, when I get together with my friends, other female Asian American female advocates, we actually sit and talk about, like, so how many times a week did we get the where are you from? Where are you really from? Because your English is really good. That is something that we just live with. And, everybody has a story. Every person I know has that story. And as Tiffany said, the resources that we created, everything, like, people can't tell us, the Koreans versus the Chinese apart, right? I'm a Korean American. When I worked in Chinatown for 10 years, Chinese grandmas and grandpas and the uncles and the aunties swore that I was Chinese, because I had a very, you have a Chinese face. I don't know what that means, but I said, thank you. I take it as a compliment. When I'm with my mom's friends who are my Japanese aunties, they all say, oh my gosh, you look so Japanese, right? We can't tell ourselves apart. And so I know that when racists target, they don't target, and they shouldn't be, but, they don't target Chinese, they don't target Koreans. Exactly what you said, Bob. we're all out there and we're all vulnerable. And so everything that we had to create, all the resources we had to create has been in 6 or 7 languages of everybody who looks East Asian at this point, right? The Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, because they're the healthcare workers who are going to work, the Nepalese, Tibetan, like everybody who looks Chinese, we all look, we're East Asian. We were bracing ourselves, and all the resources are out there. And I really appreciate Tiffany lifting up Holla Back. We work with a group in New York City called Center for Anti-Violence Education. And they've been really great about helping us to put those resources, the handbooks. There are videos about how do we keep ourselves safe, and they're done in 6 or 7 languages. I can't remember how many languages. The booklets that Tiffany is giving us a shout out. Thank you, Tiffany. Those are done in multiple languages. We need to be able to help. What's been really great is we've distributed thousands of those booklets, right? And we just can't keep them in print fast enough because, and you can download them, but it's because we need to get resources out to people because people want to stand together and people want to help us. But the story I share is of Noel, who was stashed on the L train. Just appalled. I think what finally broke me in all of this, as advocates, Tiff and I, Jan, Derrick, as people speaking for our community, we've had to develop a really hardened exterior. The thing that broke me was sitting with Noel, and Noel saying when he was slashed in the face, nobody on that L train got off the train with him. He had to walk the entire length of that platform by himself, realizing what is happening to him, right? His clothes soaked in blood. Nobody filmed anything. Nobody got off. Nobody said, "Oh my God, are you okay? I'll walk you out," right? And I'm thinking, are you serious, New York, right? Are you kidding me that if you see something so horrific happening to the person sitting in front of you, right, who's already moved across the train because there was the assailant had acted out physically. He is now walking through the entire L train platform, telling himself he needs to keep it together because if he didn't, he was going to bleed out, right? When I heard that story, it is just like the string of obscenities and then just the unbelievable pain of like somebody, and then ultimately, he got 100 stitches across his face. That scar is going to be a visible.
Wow.
For me, when I look at Noel, I check it regularly, is a reminder of like, people, you need to step up here, right? Like, if this happened to you, you know that you're going to want somebody to help you. The fact that he had to do that alone is it's really painful. And it's the part of the othering that everybody's talking about. It's the fact that everybody thinks that, he was going to, why didn't somebody step up, right? Even besides the bystander training, it's the upstander training. You need to stand up and like help people, because I'm thinking like, if that were me on the train seeing anybody get attacked, I'd get off that train and say, I'm going to call the ambulance. You need to calm down. Like, you just need to like go into that mode, right? But the fact that the L train is always crowded and nobody did anything, and that's the train that I take. I'm thinking like, damn, New York, really? Like, that's my anger right now at my fellow New Yorkers. And now everybody is sorry, they're horrified. But you know what? There are things that you can do every damn day as you live in the city. And that means you stand up not just for the Asian Americans, but people who are vulnerable. You need to recognize what is happening in your city, because people are in real danger every single day. And your job is to stand up and care for other people, because you don't live in this planet alone. And you don't live in this city alone, and people are hurting every single day. And that is the ultimate call to action for all of us.
You're right. When John Lewis said, if you see something wrong, say something. No matter who it is, say something.
Get into good trouble. So I want to go back because we had mentioned the Vincent Chin murder earlier, but we never really elaborated. And I'd like somebody to just kind of outline the details of that for those of us who might not be fully familiar with it.
I mean, I have the basic information. It's been a while since I studied actually in Stuyvesant high schools, where we we had a class and studied that. But happened in Detroit when the Japanese car industry was blowing up, and a lot of the industry in Detroit was on the decline. Vincent Chin was attending a bachelor party, and people that had just gotten laid off from American car factories decided that this Chinese guy was now a Japanese guy, even though he also worked in the American car industry, and they beat him to death with a baseball bat, during a bachelor party, and the father and son team that did this got, I think, a $7,000 fine and not 1 day in jail.
3,000.
Oh, 3,000. I
don't
gave them
even
too
know
much credit.
if you can buy a car in that time with 3,000, but it was a slap on the wrist.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just such a statement of what everybody's saying about this otherism, right? The question in and of itself, where are you from? I can ask that to Curtis or to Bob or to anybody here, and then most of our reaction is going to be like, my reaction is New York. Mm-hmm. But then it's the follow-up question that really states about that systemic racism and that otherism is, no, where are you really from?
Yes.
Really from
Manhattan. I'm really from Manhattan. Where did you learn English? New York City public school, because I was born here. So, it's not just where you from, because we all ask where you from, but it's that follow-up connotation that it's an impossibility that you're American, right? And then that's also why it's okay to kill 6 Asian women in Atlanta, why it's okay that you killed Vincent Chin for being Japanese when he's Chinese and worked in the American car industry. That's the craziness. And the only way that any of this is going to get better is if all of the minority communities band together, right? It's Black Lives Matter, because all lives can't matter until Black Lives matter. And statistically speaking, just looking at the numbers, Asian lives won't matter until Black Lives matter too, right? And we're looking at statistics. It's 43% white in New York City, but to me that means that the minorities are the majority if we stick together.
We like to call it majority minority. That's the name that we use. But to add to Derrick's story about Vincent Chin, Vincent Chin, his death was a local story, right? Just like some of the local stories happening now. That's the year that Jesse Jackson was running for president. And Jesse Jackson heard about the story, and he brought the entire national media with him to Detroit and to stand with Mrs. Chin. And so that really, he used his platform to support, the death of a young man from racism. And so when we ask about solidarity and how we use the resources that we each have to uplift each other, especially in communities of color, where, as Tiffany earlier said, what this pandemic revealed is the under-resourced communities that we live in. This is how we work together. And Reverend Jackson recently wrote a really nice op-ed remembering his work with the Asian American community, and that work really helped us, start the modern Asian American civil rights, social justice movement in this country.
Absolutely.
We're coming to the end of our hour. This has been a great conversation, and we're really honored to have you guys on and really go deeper into these issues and share our platform in hope that we can raise the level of discussion and share this information, really getting conscious New Yorkers of all backgrounds talking about it and willing to stand up against this, just as there's no difference, misogyny, racism against any group. It's just we can no longer afford to operate in silos. We have to operate in concert and recognize that there's no difference between the issues that face the Asian communities, the issues that face Black communities, the issues that are facing women, and particularly women of color. So we're really appreciative of all of you for your point of view. We remind people that if you're listening to this on WHCR 90.3 FM, that we will also be on Clubhouse on Monday night talking about these issues. If you're watching this on the YouTube stream, you can also join us if you're watching the stream live. If you're watching this on delay, make sure that you take this conversation and share it with people you know, because part of the commitment we all have to justice is to not turn a blind eye to it, and to recognize it when we see it, and have the conversations that may be uncomfortable to some, but there's nothing more uncomfortable than being killed for your ethnicity. So that's
NightWatchman. I have to find out, because if I want to get involved with any of these particular organizations, I need to know. So, Tiffany, how could someone reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find us at advancingjustice-aajc.org. We have an anti-hate resource page there. You can also email us, and I can share my email for those who request it if you are interested in resources. I would also not hesitate to reach out to your local organizations and support them if you can. Volunteer if they're looking for volunteers, because as much as we're all still grieving over what happened in Atlanta, the fact is this fear and this violence is being felt all over the country, and we really need to move towards supporting local AAPI organizations that have been serving our communities all along. So groups that are doing mental health services, for instance, small business assistance, domestic violence prevention, case management, things like that is going to help us sustain our community and to center our community when we're thinking of solutions on how to combat this violence.
Beautiful. Joanne.
Our website is aafederation.org. It's AsianAmericanFederation.org. We are a New York City organization. We know that there are a lot of folks upstate, Asian American communities upstate, who don't have the richness of resources we have. So we're also trying to reach out to them. A lot of our work is working in solidarity with other communities of color nonprofits, because we are, again, a majority minority city, and we are much more powerful together than if we try to stand separately. What Tiffany said about joining, understanding your local community, understanding, supporting, the nonprofits in your area, but also just waving hello to your fellow neighbors so that they know who you are. And if you're walking by, and just saying hello and just seeing the humanity in each other at this point, I think that is what is critical for all of us. And that is the ultimate call to action.
Excellent. Chang.
I'm going to give first of all, thank you, Joanna and Tiffany and Derrick, for supporting and reminding everyone that we do have resources in our neighborhoods. I'm going to give a great big plug to Hamilton Madison House. Hamilton Madison House, if you know someone in the Asian community, we are one of the few mental health counseling services in language for every Asian language. So if you find someone in your network, or you see someone in your building and they don't seem like they're having an okay time, make the reference to Hamilton Madison House, be that bridge, reach out to us. We can give them mental health and behavioral health counseling in language. So support us. And I think that we really need to remind the government these social services need to be supported. So thank you all for that.
Derrick, you get the last.
Absolutely. And Derrick.
Well, I don't have an organization to represent. All I can say is, please go to your local Asian community, spend your money there, support us, keep an eye out for us, and for, all of my Asian American brothers and sisters out there. Be careful, stay safe, and love each other. That's all.
And Derrick, you get props for repping Stuyvesant.
Beautiful.
Thank you all for joining us on Soul Lounge Prime Time. We're on WHCR 90.3 FM. Check us out on our YouTube channel, and stay safe, and let's all support each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.